The gates were barely open when the whisper hit London like a cold slap. King Charles may have only 2 years. No briefing, no bulletin, just that tight little phrase slipping through the cracks of Buckingham Palace and travelling faster than any motorcade. And into that charged air walked Prince Harry, smiling for cameras at the Wellchild Awards while everyone else stared past the flashes and asked the only question that mattered: is the prodigal son back because his father is dying? He didn't come just for handshakes and photo lines. Insiders say the routes were mapped, the timings rehearsed, the phones on both sides hot with private arrangements. Staff from Clarence House and Kensington Palace, who haven't agreed on anything for years, suddenly speaking the same careful language: if the meeting happens, if schedules allow, if there are no leaks. Which is Palace for, it's already penciled, and we're praying no one blows it up before the cars pull out. The Evening Standard didn't bother with euphemism. Courtiers, it claimed, are preparing for the end. No oncologist's podium, no list of organs, just that brutal silhouette: cancer, indefinite, inescapable. The king still walks, still waves, still smiles in that practiced way he learned as a boy in short trousers, but the close watchers, the ones who notice the tremor in a knuckle or the way a step takes half a beat too long, whisper that the performance is costing him. Outwardly, resilience. Inwardly, rationing. What does a son do with that? Especially a son who spent the last 3 years turning a father into a plotline. There was a time when Charles phoned him simply to hear his voice, when my darling boy was not a press quote but a habit. People forget because the book did its work and the Netflix cameras did theirs. Harry hasn't forgotten, say those who knew him when his nickname was still Spike and the worst thing in his life was an early morning run at Sandhurst. He has been sending long, oddly earnest messages to old friends, words spilling out at a length that would have earned teasing in any other era. They didn't tease. They recognized homesickness when they saw it. What those friends also recognized, and kept mostly to themselves, is the shape of that homesickness. It is not a Malibu ache for ocean sunsets. It is a Balmoral ache: rain on granite, damp tweed in a hallway, wood smoke, a dog's paws on flagstones. And it is solitary. Almost no one, in these private reconnect-irons, mentions Meghan. When visitors from London drop into Montecito, she is elsewhere. When Harry imagines a base in Britain, he imagines it quietly. The brand they built together hates quiet. This is not brand thinking. This is blood thinking. Blood is also why Camilla is rattling the bars of a cage she thought she'd finally left behind. Her friends are blunt: if Harry returns under a veil of impending grief, it invites the one spectre she can never defeat, Diana. The people's memory doesn't run in straight lines, it loops. It loops back to a young woman in a black dress, to a holiday in the Alps, to boys following a coffin. Every tender frame resurrected every time Harry sets foot on British soil, and every one of those frames a reminder that there is a version of the monarchy where Camilla does not exist. She fought for decades to prove she belongs. One sorrowful reunion could push her back into the margins in a week. William will not say it publicly, but his position is carved in stone. He believes in consequence. He believes the interview, the book, the insinuations, the casual shrapnel aimed at his wife, all had a price. He will not pay that price for a photo opportunity. But even he cannot forbid a dying man the comfort of his youngest child. So the plan, say people who talk in corridors, is minimal and controlled. No cameras. No staff beyond the indispensable. A room that doesn't leak. Time enough to say what needs saying, not time enough to rehearse a speech. Security muddies even that. Harry's legal challenge over. Police protection still skulks through the system. His team says he cannot move freely without it. The Home Office says that's not how this works. Frogmore is gone. Windsor is complicated. Highgrove is a question mark. No one wants to offer up Kensington Palace only to host another chapter of a never-ending memoir. And yet, the same people who say no with their mouths are checking diaries with their eyes. The king does not have decades to spare while lawyers argue. If you want to understand the mood at the top, imagine a study at Clarence House later than an ailing man should be awake. A red box unopened on a table. 2 cups cooling. Charles looks older than he did a month ago. Fatigue wipes years off a face the wrong way round. He is not a monster and never was. He is a complicated man who has made harmful choices and lived long enough to regret most of them. He asks whether they can talk, as if that hasn't been the problem all along. Harry nods because nodding is easier than speaking. Somewhere in that house is a memory of a wedding he didn't ruin and a christening he did. Somewhere in that house is a painting of a woman whose shadow makes strangers forget Camilla breathes air. Meghan's silence is its own story. Her allies insist she is protecting her children and her sanity. Her critics insist she is counting clicks. The truth is simpler and messier. Every time Harry sets one foot in Britain without her, they look less like a unit and more like a negotiation. The Sussex brand requires a stage, reconciliation requires a confessional. Those are not the same room. And old friends who used to joke loudly now whisper that California hasn't delivered the belonging Harry pretended it would. Charity events can crowd a calendar. They cannot fill a house at dusk. Well Child, once a gentle annual ritual, becomes a theatre set for a dozen competing narratives. Every squeeze of a parent's hand, every crouch to a child's eye level, is pressed into service. The tabloids frame him as the dutiful son returning to the bedside. The palace traditionalists frame him as the opportunist smelling incense. The truth lives nowhere near those headlines. It lives in the way he lingers between doors when the cars are ready to leave. In the glance to the left where the mall disappears. In the face he makes when a security man half his age calls him sir with an accent that sounds like home. Camilla's circle has not been idle. They bristle at the idea that a woman who steadied a restless prince is now to be sidelined by a son who threw matches into the family library and then complained about the smell of smoke. They brief quietly that the king needs calm, not chaos, that William and Catherine offer years of quiet service while Harry offers years of broadcast grief. They ask a hard question in a soft voice. What does a father get in return for forgiving a son whose currency is the past? William won't take the bait. He is the still point in this spinning room, not because he lacks feeling but because he has learned the hard way that feeling is a liability in public. He does the school run. He turns up at a hospice with no press call and sits where no one can photograph him crying. He reads the briefings and then ignores most of them. He trusts very few people, and he trusts Catherine with the bits of his heart that still ache when he thinks of a car in a Paris tunnel. He will not hand that heart to anyone who sells stories for a living, even if that anyone is his brother. And so the clockwork continues. 2 years becomes 24 months becomes 700-something days. Every number is a drumbeat. The king's calendar tightens, fewer long-haul trips, more local engagements, the occasional vanished afternoon politely described as private. He does not complain. He complains in small ways, a sigh, a hand pressed to a rib when he thinks no one is looking. Camilla soldiers on, immaculate, brittle, smiling a half-second too late. She understands performance better than anyone. She also knows when the audience isn't with her. The public is split along its usual fault lines. Those who never forgave Harry will not start now. Those who never forgave Charles don't mind if Harry walks in through a side door and never leaves. The rest, older and quieter, remember enough funerals to know that a family should be allowed to be a family at the end, even if it has forgotten how the rest of the time. They grumble about security budgets and then tell a friend in the supermarket queue that perhaps a father and son ought to talk while the talking can still be done. Inside the palace, the logistics people do what logistics people always do, draw up plans A through F, each with its own route, its own driver, its own plausible denial. If a photographer appears at the wrong corner, the cars turn right. If a staffer blinks at the wrong moment, the door doesn't open. Someone remembers to bring a box of tissues. Someone else remembers that this is a family that does not like tears. They clear the room of pens. If the meeting happens, it will be short, and it will not fix the years. If it does not, the headlines will pretend it never mattered, and the private regret will be sharp as glass. Either way, the monarchy moves forward because that is all it knows how to do. It marched past abdications and assassinations and divorces that felt like assassinations. It will march past this, a countdown no one can stop, a reconciliation no one can trust, a woman who took the long road to a throne and may yet feel the ground shift under her chair. There is a particularly British cruelty in the way this story is unfolding. We measure men not by what they build, but by what we think we can take away. Charles spent a lifetime talking to trees because trees didn't talk back. Now the nation wants him to narrate his own decline. Harry spent a lifetime being told who he was. Now he wants to tell it himself and finds no one is listening unless he is breaking something. William has learned to speak in the quiet between cameras. Catherine has learned to survive in the space where love and duty argue and neither wins. 2 years is a rumor until it isn't. The king's doctors will say as little as the law allows. The palace will insist on business as usual until the last minute of the last day. The country will queue because queuing is what it does when it cannot fix the thing it loves. And somewhere between the great west door and a small room with a single lamp, a father will decide whether to forgive a son before the son can forgive himself. Watch the faces, not the statements. Watch the hands, not the headlines. If Harry lingers in London longer than the diary says, you will know. If Charles smiles with his eyes and not just his mouth after a day resting comfortably, you will know. If Camilla's jaw tightens when a reporter mentions Diana, you already know. And if, one night soon, a car slips through the palace gates without a motorcade, just a black shape against iron, you will know that time, not Netflix, has written the next scene. Until then, the bells stay quiet. The portraits stay on the walls. The guards change on the hour. A monarch counts days he will not admit to counting. A son circles a home he isn't sure he still has. A brother builds a future that cannot afford another fire. And the country watches, the way it always has, with a tenderness it pretends is cynicism, waiting to see whether a family famous for everything except forgiveness can manage that one small, impossible thing before the clock runs down.